I never expected that a porch swing could cause so much trouble. It started with something simple, something peaceful. I had just retired and moved into this quiet suburban neighborhood, thinking I'd finally found a little slice of calm in this chaotic world. My house had a wide front porch with white pillars, a few hanging flower baskets, and enough space to stretch out and watch the sun go down. I'd always dreamed of having a porch swing, something that reminded me of my grandmother's house in Mississippi. So one weekend, I bought a beautiful wooden swing with soft cushions, hung it carefully with sturdy chains, and placed it right in the middle of the porch. It wasn't flashy, just comfortable. On the first evening I sat in that swing, I remember how the world seemed to slow down. Birds chirped in the distance, kids rode their bikes past the house, and I sipped iced tea while swaying gently. It felt like I had finally made it. After years of working long hours, saving every penny, raising my kids, and handling everything life threw my way, I had earned this peace. And I wasn't hurting anyone. In fact, a few neighbors even waved and complimented it. "That's a beautiful swing," one of them said. "Looks cozy," another added. I thought nothing of it until I got the letter. A week after putting up the swing, I opened my mailbox to find a white envelope with the HOA's logo stamped in the corner. I thought maybe it was a newsletter or an announcement, but no, it was a warning, a violation notice. I read the letter 3 times before I even believed what it said. According to the Homeowners Association, my porch swing was visually distracting and created an atmosphere that encouraged loitering and unproductive relaxation. I had to remove it within 10 days or face a fine of $200 per week. I laughed out loud. I actually chuckled right there on my front steps. It sounded ridiculous. Too relaxing? Was that really the problem? I even called the HOA office, thinking this had to be a mistake. But the woman who answered was as serious as a court clerk. "Your porch swing isn't in compliance with the approved outdoor decor list," she said flatly. "It draws attention. We've received multiple complaints." I asked, "Complaints from who?" But of course, she wouldn't say. "Residents are entitled to anonymity," she replied. That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. Someone really had a problem with my peaceful little swing. Now, I'm not the type to go looking for trouble, but I'm also not the type to back down when I know something is unfair. This wasn't about property values. It wasn't about safety. It was about control. Some people love rules so much that they forget to use common sense. So I had a decision to make. I could take the swing down and go back to sitting in a stiff patio chair like nothing happened. Or I could make a statement. And that's when the idea hit me. If one porch swing was too relaxing, what would they say about 50? The next day, I went back to the hardware store and bought another swing. Then another. Then I started checking online marketplaces and even garage sales. I found old porch swings, tire swings, bench swings, anything that could hang from a chain or a beam. I fixed them up, painted a few in cheerful colors, and started installing them one by one. Not just on my porch, but in my backyard, on tree limbs, under the carport. Some were hung side by side. Others were tied between trees. I even made a small swing for my dog. Neighbors started noticing right away. At first, they thought it was some kind of art project. A few walked by and stared, unsure if they should say anything. But one lady clapped and said, "I love your spirit." A teenager who walked his dog past my house every afternoon started stopping to swing for a few minutes. It became a little local attraction. People began calling my yard the swing sanctuary. I knew the HOA wouldn't stay silent for long. And sure enough, 2 days later another letter arrived. This one was even more dramatic than the first. It accused me of willful non-compliance, disruptive yard installations, and creating a public nuisance. But it didn't say anything about a specific number of swings. And it still wasn't clear what rule I had broken. It all came down to the same vague reason: the atmosphere I was creating. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I kept adding swings. I built a few more from scratch, using reclaimed wood and thick rope. A local woodworker even offered to donate one. I added small wind chimes to some, flower baskets to others. The whole space felt like a peaceful retreat. Kids from the block started coming by after school. A few retirees brought their coffee over in the morning. People smiled, laughed, relaxed. It was exactly the kind of joy this neighborhood needed, but the HOA wasn't pleased. One morning, a board member showed up at my front door. He was dressed in a blazer and had a clipboard in his hand. "You're causing a disruption," he said, without even saying hello. I asked him to sit and offered him some iced tea, but he refused. He wanted to take photos, document the situation. He didn't like the fact that strangers were coming to swing. He called it a liability risk. I asked him, "Do you really believe people swinging quietly in a yard is a danger?" He didn't answer. He handed me a thick packet filled with citations, threats of legal action, and a demand to remove all swings immediately. I told him I'd think about it, but I already knew what I'd do. I sat on my original porch swing that night and thought about everything that had happened. All I wanted was a peaceful retirement, a quiet porch, and something that reminded me of home. Instead, I had sparked a war with the Homeowners Association over something as harmless as relaxing. It would have been funny if it hadn't become so personal. The more they pushed back, the more I realized this wasn't just about a swing anymore. It was about how some people can't stand to see others at peace, unless it fits their version of what's acceptable. So, I didn't take the swings down. In fact, that weekend, I added 5 more. This time, people began knocking on my door. One woman, probably in her 60s, introduced herself as Donna. She lived just 2 blocks away. "I used to love swinging as a kid," she said, smiling shyly. "Mind if I try one?" I told her to pick any swing she liked. She sat on one under the tree in the front yard and stayed there for nearly an hour. When she left, she looked 10 years lighter. Word spread fast. A group of moms started bringing their toddlers by in the mornings. A retired teacher started hosting book club meetings on the swings in the backyard. I had to build a little sign that read, "Please respect the space. Enjoy. Swing softly." It wasn't a park. It was just my yard, but it was becoming a haven. And that's when the media caught wind of it. A local news station reached out. They wanted to do a human interest piece. I hesitated at first, but after thinking about how much stress the HOA had caused over something so innocent, I agreed. A news van pulled up one Saturday morning, and a cheerful reporter named Kim stepped out. She asked me how it all started. I told her the truth. That I just wanted a swing, that the HOA called it too relaxing, and that I decided to respond with kindness and more swings. The piece aired the following evening, and things exploded. Suddenly, people were emailing me. Messages came from other neighborhoods, other states, even a few from overseas. People sent photos of their own swings. Some told me they had also been targeted by their HOA for silly things: flower colors, mailbox shapes, patio furniture. I didn't know so many people felt trapped in places that were supposed to be their homes. But with the tension came pressure. The HOA wasn't happy. The next letter was more serious. This time, it included a legal threat. They said I was violating zoning laws, that the increased foot traffic posed safety issues, that I had created a commercial gathering space without approval. They claimed I was encouraging outsiders to enter the neighborhood. One part of the letter even said I was undermining the tranquility and uniform standards of the community. I laughed out loud when I read that. Tranquility? I thought that's exactly what I was creating. They gave me 10 days to remove all swings or face a formal lawsuit. I didn't want to fight. I never did. But I also didn't want to back down when so many people were finding joy in something so simple. So, I contacted a lawyer, a young woman named Sarah who had just started her own firm. She believed in my story immediately. She said, "We're not just defending swings here, we're defending sanity." She helped me look up the HOA's bylaws, and as it turned out, there was no specific rule against porch swings or backyard swings. Nothing that limited how many. Nothing. That said, I couldn't allow guests to sit in them. The only things they had were vague words like community aesthetic and visual order. Sarah wrote them a letter back, strong, clear, and polite. It said that unless they could point to an actual rule I was violating, they had no case. Days passed, then a week, then 2. No response. Instead, something else happened. One by one, my neighbors started putting up swings. It began with the lady across the street. She hung a single rope swing from a tree in her front yard. Then the guy next door added a glider on his porch. Then another neighbor put up a small wooden bench swing by her driveway. It was like a movement had started. People who had barely spoken to one another were suddenly bonding over chains and cushions. Kids who used to play inside were now out on the swings every evening. Even the crankiest neighbor on the block, Mr. Howerton, a retired dentist, built a swing and painted it bright red. "Don't tell anyone," he grumbled, "but it's more comfortable than my recliner." The neighborhood began to change. Slower, warmer, softer. People waved more, talked more, laughed more. One morning, as I sat on the swing with my coffee, watching the sunrise and listening to the breeze rustle the trees, a man I had never seen before walked up to my gate. He looked like he was in his 70s. He wore a baseball cap and leaned on a cane. "Is this the swing house?" he asked with a smile. I nodded. He said, "I lost my wife last year. I haven't been able to sleep well since, but someone told me this place feels like peace." I told him to come in and choose any swing he liked. He sat quietly for a long time. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The swing did all the talking. That's when I realized something powerful. Comfort is contagious, and kindness spreads fast. The HOA may have wanted to take away one swing, but in doing so, they gave birth to 50 more, and a community that had once been tight-lipped and rule-bound was now open, free, and full of joy. I didn't know what they'd try next. I knew the battle might not be over, but I also knew one thing for sure. They picked the wrong swing to mess with. Summer came quickly that year, and with it, the swings became more than just seats. They became symbols. Families came out after dinner. Teens brought guitars. Older folks, who usually stayed indoors, now sat in the shade, sharing stories from the old days. One evening, I watched a young couple get engaged under the oak swing in my backyard. I don't think they even knew I was sitting a few yards away. That swing had become their safe place, and honestly, I felt honored. But just when things seemed to finally settle, the HOA struck again. This time, they didn't send a letter. They showed up in person. 3 board members, dressed in crisp polo shirts and holding clipboards, rang my doorbell one afternoon. I recognized one of them, Janice, the same woman who originally called my swing too relaxing. She wore a fake smile, but I could tell she was tense. "Good afternoon," she said as I opened the door. I greeted them calmly, offered them sweet tea, which they declined. "We're here because it's become clear that your property is now a destination," she began. "We've received complaints about traffic, about noise, and about the general disruption to the neighborhood." I almost laughed. The only traffic was the occasional jogger or stroller. The only noise, laughter, and conversation, she continued. "We understand your intentions were good, but this isn't a community park, and you're setting a precedent. Other homeowners are now imitating you. It's turning our neighborhood into something chaotic." I told her that for the first time since moving in, people were actually acting like neighbors. No one was hosting wild parties. There was no vandalism, just people finding comfort in something that required no money, no power, and no permission, just chains and a wooden seat. But Janice wasn't interested in community. She was interested in control. She handed me a thick folder. "These are new policy revisions the board has passed. Effective immediately. Decorative or functional items visible from the street must be limited to 2 per home. This includes swings." So they were changing the rules mid-game, just to target me. I looked her right in the eyes. "You're not trying to protect the neighborhood. You're trying to punish joy." They didn't stay long after that. The next day, the HOA emailed every homeowner a notice of the new rule. They called it the Visual Uniformity Policy. They framed it as a way to preserve property values and prevent unregulated displays. But everyone knew what it was really about. I was angry, not just for myself, but for everyone who had followed my lead, everyone who had dared to make their yards a little happier. Now, they were all being forced to take their swings down or face fines. But then something unexpected happened. The next morning, someone left a note on my porch. Just one word: resist. That evening, neighbor across the street hung 3 new swings, big ones, painted bright blue. Another family put up a wooden frame on their lawn with 2 swings hanging side by side. By the end of the week, our street looked like a summer camp. Even people who hadn't talked to me before were participating. It was no longer just about me. It had become something bigger, a quiet stand against control disguised as order. Then came the petition. Sarah, my lawyer, helped draft it. We called it the right to swing. It demanded that the HOA remove the new policy and allow homeowners the freedom to decorate and enjoy their property within reason. We explained that swings weren't hazards, weren't unsightly, and weren't disturbing the peace. They were simply expressions of comfort and joy. Within days, we gathered over 80 signatures, more than enough to call a vote. That vote would take place at the next HOA meeting, just 2 weeks away. In the meantime, I left every swing exactly where it was. I even added one more, this time double-seater shaped like a crescent moon. It became everyone's favorite. The media came back. A larger network this time. They loved the story. A peaceful community standing up against arbitrary rules with nothing but wooden boards and steel chains. When they aired the follow-up piece, it sparked something even bigger. Swing donations started arriving. A carpenter from Oregon mailed me a handmade cedar swing. A school in Vermont sent painted swings decorated by their students. Someone even sent a quilted swing seat with embroidered words that read, "Keep swinging." I hung every single one. By the time the HOA meeting came, the tension in the room was heavy. More people showed up than I'd ever seen at a board meeting. The folding chairs filled fast. Some brought their kids. Others brought lawn chairs and sat outside, listening through open windows. The board members looked overwhelmed. This wasn't the sleepy little group they were used to controlling. Sarah stood up to speak. She didn't yell. She didn't insult anyone. She just told the truth. She explained that people weren't trying to destroy order, they were trying to create connection. That a community is more than property lines and fences. That sometimes, the smallest acts of rebellion can bring the biggest acts of unity. When it was time for the vote, every hand in the room went up. The policy was overturned. Cheers broke out. People hugged. Some cried. And I just sat quietly, hands folded, heart full. I never set out to change anything. But when something small touches enough hearts, it has a way of turning into something unstoppable. That night, I sat on my porch swing again. This time, I wasn't alone. Donna, the woman who had tried the first swing months ago, sat beside me. The man with the cane was back too, on the swing near the tree. The neighborhood buzzed with life, peaceful, real life. All I ever wanted was a place to rest. Turns out, that swing built a community. The weeks after the vote felt like a different world. It wasn't just about the swings anymore. People who had never made eye contact before were now stopping to say hello. Neighbors baked for each other. Kids played outside again instead of being glued to screens. The sidewalks were full at sunset, grandparents walking hand in hand, parents pushing strollers, teens riding bikes. Everything had shifted. One morning, got a letter, but this time, it wasn't from the HOA. It was from a woman named Elaine, who lived 2 states away. She had seen the story on TV and felt moved to write. She said her neighborhood felt cold and disconnected, and the swings gave her hope. She ended her letter with, "Thank you for reminding us what it means to be a neighbor." More letters followed. A lot more. Hundreds, from all over the country. Some were short, just a few lines. Others were several pages long. But they all shared a common thread: people wanted connection. Real, human connection. And somehow, a few wooden swings reminded them that it was possible. I kept them all in a box, right by my front door. I'd open 1 or 2 every morning with my coffee. Some made me laugh. Some made me cry. Some came with little drawings from children or pictures of families who had built swings of their own. It was never about rebellion. It was about creating a space where people felt safe to sit and just be. That's when the idea for the community swing garden started. There was an old vacant lot at the end of our street, just weeds and broken fence posts. The HOA had long forgotten about it, and no one really used it. I brought it up to the neighbors one evening, half expecting people to be too busy or hesitant, but they didn't hesitate at all. Within days, people were mowing, clearing trash, leveling the ground. Someone donated mulch, another brought in some solar lights. One family offered to build a pergola, and together, we created the neighborhood's first ever peace patch. We hung 12 swings there at first, each one different, some painted, some plain, some single-seaters, some big enough for families. We added benches, a little free library, and even a chalkboard where people could leave kind messages. No one vandalized it, no one abused it, because it belonged to everyone. A year later, the HOA tried again softly this time. They sent a letter asking if the swing garden could be relocated or reduced, citing insurance concerns and a need to preserve neighborhood order. But the response from the community was swift. This time, I didn't have to organize anything. Parents wrote in. Seniors wrote in. Even teenagers stood up to speak at the next meeting, saying they had never felt more connected to their own neighborhood than they did now. One girl, maybe 14 or 15, stood up with a shaky voice and said, "I used to think no one knew I existed. But when I sit on the yellow swing by the fence, someone always waves. I feel like I matter now." That was it. The board didn't push the issue again. As time passed, other neighborhoods reached out. Some asked for tips, others wanted to visit. One nearby town built a replica of our peace patch. They called it the swing spot. They invited me to its opening ceremony. I didn't say much when I got there, just sat in a swing and smiled. Because sometimes, silence says enough. I think about that first swing often, the one the HOA hated so much. I still have it, of course. It hangs in its same place on my porch. The wood has faded a little, and the ropes are softer now from years of use. But when I sit in it, I feel grounded. Like that first moment, I decided not to give in to something petty, but instead to lean into something kind. Strangely, even Janice changed. A few months after the garden opened, she stopped by my porch. No clipboard, no scowl, just her and a peach pie she had baked. "I fought it because I didn't understand it," she said. "I thought order was the only way to keep things peaceful. But I see now, peace looks different sometimes." She stayed a while, sat in the swing next to me. She didn't say much after that, but I could tell something in her had softened. Now, we're not best friends or anything, but we wave. And sometimes that's enough. Years have passed since that first swing went up. The community has grown. New families move in. Old ones move away. But the spirit remains. There are over 100 swings in the area now. Not just in yards or parks, but in front of shops, churches, and schools. Someone even started a swing and read program at the library where kids sit and read in big hanging chairs. It's the smallest things that stick with people. The lesson in all this? Change doesn't always need a march or a megaphone. Sometimes it just needs a quiet place to sit, and someone brave enough to stay seated when the world says stand. They said my porch swing was too relaxing. Maybe it was, but I'd rather be too relaxing than too rigid. I'd rather invite joy than enforce silence. And if all it takes is a swing to remind people to breathe, to listen, and to care, then I'll keep putting them up, one swing at a time.